Welcome, friends. I'm Father John Deere, and welcome to this Beatitudes Center Zoom session with our special guest today, my friend Dr. Ken Butigan. You can find many other upcoming great Zoom programs and information about the free weekly global podcast, the Nonviolent Jesus podcast, at www.beatitudecenter.org. Let me first just remind everyone, please, to keep yourself muted and to write questions and comments for Ken in the chat. And I hope Ken will speak, at length, maybe even for an hour. And then we'll open up to your comments and questions, and we'll end right at the hour and a half mark. And we'll send out the Zoom recording link in a few days. So everybody, let's begin with a little prayer. I invite you, wherever you are, just to maybe close your eyes, take a deep breath, just relax, notice how you're feeling this morning. And let's together enter into the presence of the God of peace, who loves each one of you individually and unconditionally, and the whole human race. And let's welcome the nonviolent Jesus here into our hearts and our circle, and take a moment to ask for whatever graces we need to continue to follow him on the path of nonviolence. Beloved God, thank you for all the blessings of life, love, and peace that you give us. Be with us now as we reflect with our friend Ken on your call to follow the nonviolent Jesus on the path of active, creative gospel nonviolence. Bless us, heal us, disarm us, inspire us, enlighten us, strengthen us, and send us forward to do your will, that we might do our bit to help end violence, war, poverty, injustice, and also authoritarianism, fascism, white supremacy, genocide, nuclear weapons, and environmental destruction, the whole thing, that we might be who you created us to be, your holy beatitude people, your holy peacemakers, your beloved sons and daughters. We ask this blessing in the name of the nonviolent Jesus. Amen. So welcome again, friends, and I'm very happy to welcome back to the Beatitude Center my longtime friend, activist, teacher, author, and organizer, Dr. Ken Butigan, who recently retired after a long, brilliant career teaching peace and nonviolence at DePaul University in Chicago. And he continues to work with the great peace organization, Pace Bene, where I had the privilege of working with him for several years. 30 years ago, Ken wrote and published this groundbreaking book, From Violence to Wholeness: A Spirituality and Practice of Active Nonviolence, which could be used as a 10-week program or a guidebook for an intensive weekend workshop to explore nonviolence as a creative, powerful, and effective process for addressing and solving conflicts in our personal lives and in the world, using the lessons and teachings of Jesus, Gandhi, Dorothy Day, Dr. King, and many others. Many of us consider it the best program of its kind. So, given this horrible, terrible moment in history that we're living through for our country and the world, I invited Ken to walk us through again the basics of the spirituality and practice of nonviolence, and to help us through these days, but also maybe and specifically and more even intentionally, because this is September 2025 when we're recording. And so for those of you watching this now, we're getting ready for the October 18th national mobilization of the No Kings March, which they're hoping will be twice as big in June with millions and millions of people. And we all need to be a presence of nonviolence there. You can order Ken's book and get other materials from him at pacebene.org, which is also under campaignonviolence.org. So a little more about Ken. Besides teaching at DePaul and working at Pace Bene, Dr. Ken Butigan has worked for decades on many grassroots movements. He was a key leader in the Pledge of Resistance movement, which helped prevent the Ronald Reagan administration from having a full-on invasion of Nicaragua in the 80s. Leader in the Nevada Desert Experience, we brought tens of thousands of people to the Nevada desert to stop nuclear weapons testing. A leader of the Declaration of Peace movement in the 2000s, which helped end and shift U.S. opinion against the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And now Campaign Nonviolence, the National Week of Action, which is happening right now around the country. He's also a leader with our friend Marie Dennis, who's on the Zoom today, with the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, which seeks to help encourage the Vatican to promote gospel nonviolence. You can check that out at paxchristi.net. Ken's the author of several other books, including Nonviolent Lives and Pilgrimage Through a Burning World. If you all haven't heard this summer I did a podcast with Ken, pretty much on his life story, walking through all these grassroots movements. And I really hope you all listen to it. It's for free. It's at the Beatitude Center website, because it's really inspiring to see the difference one person can make in something that seems impossible. And that's at the heart of Ken. So everybody, please give a rousing round of applause and welcome to my friend, Dr. Ken Butigan. Ken, the floor is yours.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, John, for having me aboard. And I am just thrilled to be here because, as all of us know, we're in the midst of maybe the greatest crisis in the history of this country and maybe of the world in a certain way. And I'm just glad that we're gathered. And I'm so grateful, John, for all the ways you're gathering all of us to deepen and become change makers. So critical. So I thought I would start with the prayer that Cesar Chavez, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers with Dolores Huerta, the prayer he wrote that he recited every day of his life after he wrote it, called the United Farm Worker Prayer. And so I want to invite us to just, again, let's see, here we go. Invite us to really take this in. And I think that it speaks not just to the movement that he was about, which was really about the human and civil rights of the migrant poor and those who put food on the table, but for us as well. Show me the suffering of the most miserable, so I will know my people's plight. Free me to pray for others, for you are present in every person. Help me to take responsibility for my own life so that I can be free at last. Grant me courage to serve others, for in service there is true life. Give me honesty and patience so that I can work with others. Bring forth song and celebration so that the Spirit will be alive among us. Let the Spirit flourish and grow so we will never tire of the struggle. Let us remember those who have died for justice, for they have given us life. Help us love even those who hate us so we can change the world. There is so much in this prayer that can guide us in this time, but I'm especially taken with this last stanza. Chavez says, help us love even those who hate us, not because it's nice or more moral or because Jesus said we should do that. Why? Because loving our enemies, loving those who hate us, can help us change the world. So we stand at a difficult moment. And I think, though, that history tells us that change typically comes in the midst of crisis. And we are in a crisis. And I'm holding on to the hope, the belief that actually in the midst of this crisis, the possibilities, the seeds for change are being planted. And I am so grateful that we're here in this circle today because no matter the size of the group, it can be those seeds. Every one of us here today, everyone that John has called into this circle, and many more, but in this circle, you all are capable, not by ourselves, because if we try to change the world by ourselves, we'll be destroyed by it. But we are all ordinary, cranky, beautiful, resilient human beings who, by pooling our people power, pooling our faithful engagement with the nonviolent Jesus and the nonviolence throughout the world, things can happen. So as I was preparing for this talk, I was reminded of something I heard Gil Bailey, who wrote the book Violence Unveiled some years ago. He said it in a talk, and I'm going to paraphrase what Bailey said to us. He said, "If we make it to the year 100,000, it will probably be because in the year 2025, Christians finally realized that Jesus called us to be nonviolent. It took us a couple thousand years to figure this out, but then we took it seriously. The people in the year 100,000 will look back and see us in the 21st century as practically the early church. We practically saw Jesus walking around. That was like 98,000 years ago. Well, so building on what Gil is saying here, I'm less concerned about getting to the year 100,000 than making it through the 21st century. Uh, it seems to me, after this crazy time and also these years of being involved in movements with people like John and Marie and others who are in the circle today, that we can only get through the 21st century if we increasingly opt for nonviolence. As of course Dr. King said, the choice isn't between violence and nonviolence, it's nonviolence or non-existence. But my job today is not to bum us out. Instead, it's to invite us to the thrill of nonviolence, the excitement of living not captured by violence or fatalistic passivity, um, but creative life, life, the creative life of love and action, which is active and liberating nonviolence. From my perspective, it's the only way through the labyrinth of the current moment and the maze of the 21st century. Jesus, of course, pointed us in this direction by saying and showing what it means to put down our sword and become peacemakers. What Pope Leo, in his first moments as pontiff, said when he proclaimed that Christ's peace is unarmed and disarming. And he's been saying it repeatedly since May. That gospel nonviolence is rejecting the temptation of violence, refusing to harm others, and putting love in action in our relationships and in our world. And Jesus shows us this. So I am going to make a really bold, maybe even controversial, maybe insane comment right at the start here. I think, given how challenging everything is now, how violent the world is, how the global culture of violence, what Pope Francis called the Third World War, being fought piecemeal, how terrible it all is, actually leads us to this bold idea that we are on the precipice, the edge of the epic of loving our enemies. It's really the only way forward. That we will, as a planet, have to learn this thing that was announced 2,000 years ago of loving our enemies. And is this the new age in spite of everything? That's what I'm betting on. Maybe from this day forward. given what we're all talking about here. So instead of being an unutterable ideal, love your enemies is a powerful force. And was stated by Angie O'Gorman, who spent part of her life as a human rights protector in Guatemala, facing a lot of violence, where she said, it is a powerful force by which Jesus meant wanting wholeness and well-being and life for those who may be broken and sick and deadly. It was meant to be the cornerstone of an entirely new process of discerning and disarming evil, one which would decrease evil instead of feeding it as violence does. Well, what does love in this context mean? For my money, love in this context is the process of acknowledging, safeguarding, and engaging with the humanness, woundedness, and sacredness of others, including our enemies, while creatively challenging their violence and injustice. So, how do we do this? Sounds daunting, especially in this time of chaos and destruction. So today in our time together, I invite us to explore two important elements of this nonviolent life: training and community. And to do this, I will specifically reflect, because John asked me on a process and a program that I was called to imagine 30 years ago, called From Violence to Wholeness. Through ongoing shared reflection, mutual support, and experiments in nonviolent action, From Violence to Wholeness seeks to foster innovative and deeply human solutions to violence and injustice experienced in our lives and in the larger life of the world. And so our roadmap for today is, I'm going to not begin with a lot of theories. I actually want to start with a series of examples of nonviolent action, some of them easier than others. The degree of difficulty maybe increases as we go along. So that will be one thing for us to kind of reflect on that. And then secondly, what are some elements? We can't go through the whole program of From Violence to Wholeness, but some elements of this process. And then finally, to invite us to get further training. Some of us are really trained up, and some of us, this is a new thing for us. In any case, I think training is indicated and warranted in this time of great challenge. And then finally, as part of that, how do you find your people? Can we get in a community that supports one another? When I was a baby activist, we called them affinity groups, and I'm still in an affinity group, and I really think they're really helpful, and we'll talk about that. All right, so to start off, and John sent this out in the note going out in advertising this. What if the Archbishop of your diocese, if you stand in the Catholic tradition, or if not, maybe imagine this, one of the leaders of the local Catholic Church, sent out a prophetic call to all parishioners and priests, strongly encouraging them to join them in engaging in a nonviolent Christian witness at the federal building, resisting an ICE raid. What would you need to be prepared? What would the other parishioners and priests need? What do you think the Archbishop would need? It's been my experience, unfortunately, that most priests in the Catholic Church are not trained as nonviolent change agents. In fact, some of us have tried to get more training on this into seminaries, and we've been rebuffed at different points. Most Catholics are not trained as nonviolent change agents either, except by happenstance. So we had a recent example of this, and let's reflect a little bit. This was in the publication, The New Republic, and was called "The Bishop Who Made Ice Melt Away." So at the federal building in San Francisco, the fourth floor hallway feels like a gauntlet. This is from that article. 8 immigration courtrooms, their doors spaced evenly along off-white walls, open onto a corridor where masked immigration and customs officials lean and wait, arms crossed, boots pressed against the wall, marks of habitual occupation. Immigrants step off the elevator into a narrow passage that can end with a van ride to a detention center. This is um, they had been there at first, the masks and posture of authority. Then a delegation appears, 10 clergy in collars, 1 in vestments, an imam in a kufi, 2 Roman Catholic bishops, and 1 Episcopal bishop, all from California, walking behind Catholic Bishop Michael Pham of San Diego. As they approached, the agents broke apart, one by one, and disappeared. On that day, not a single person was detained. So why might you need training to do this, what turned out to be a fairly simple action? The bishop had called together these clergy. Likely there were other members of the people of God, the laity, or the people in the pews along with. We don't know if they did a nonviolence training. We don't know if these priests got nonviolence training in their seminary experience. But imagine yourself getting the call from the bishop saying, "Can you join me at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning at the federal building?" We don't know what's going to happen. We can't guarantee anything. So I'm going to stop it there for a moment. And I'd like to ask you in the chat, just take a moment. What kind of training is needed to do even such a relatively simple but actually powerful nonviolent action? We'll take a minute. If you would, in the chat, I'm thinking you have access to the chat. Take a moment at whatever level you feel comfortable and try to reflect on what would be involved in that. What kind of training would you need? What would you have to deal with in your own self, perhaps? Uh-huh. Other other things that would be helpful to get some training to prepare you for that. So I'm seeing prayerful grounding in purpose, preparing for a different response from ICE agents, practicing scenarios, uh, meditation and inner self-reflection. I would need to know my rights and what ICE can do or not do, what our rights and legal framework are. Mindful that Daniel Berrigan used to always take a toothbrush with him in case he was arrested. So being prepared for arrest. Might need to know what would be legal in that building. Knowledge of the process. Definitely a training with role playing. Training on conflict resolution that might help de-escalate the situation and how to remain calm in that kind of a situation. Contemplation as tension between suffering, the reality of the nature of our nature, and the spiritual call to holiness. I'm really grateful for everything you put in the chat. All of those speak to why preparation, formation, and training is essential to take even a relatively um, simple action, which could have gone very differently. The ICE agents could have um, attacked the group, could have arrested the group, could have separated people in the group. So having the opportunity to have that training, I think, is really important. So let's go. I found out early in my own career as a change agent, a faith-based change agent, that training was essential. It was really, really important because it gave me a vision and a toolbox for dealing with what you're going to encounter, not just on the day of a particular action, but as being somebody who is pitting yourself against systems of domination. And we're in a moment when we're seeing that happen across this country and other places where authoritarianism is on the move. And so the more training we get. So let me uh, have us think a little more expansively on this. I'm going to put my PowerPoint back up. Um, so many of us may know the story of a movement that decided to non-violently resist a dictatorship in the Philippines in the 1980s that had been 20 years engaging in authoritarian and dictatorial attacks on society and people. And um, the leader of the Catholic Church didn't know what to do. He thought the only options were passivity or violence, and heard from his priest, for example, well, the only thing that this dictator, whose name was Ferdinand Marcos, will understand is violence. It's going to take 10 years, 10,000 people will die, but that's the only way to deal with this injustice and this violence. And he was approached by some members of one of the Catholic women's congregations in Manila who said, bring some nonviolence trainers to the Philippines and let's see what nonviolence can do. And some of you know that story. They did a 3-day nonviolence training. At the end of it, the Cardinal Sin, said, oh my gosh, this is at the heart of Jesus, and it's the heart of what we can do. And he authorized um, the organizing of hundreds of nonviolence trainings. They didn't know when they would use it, but as some of us know, there was a moment when the dictator tried to steal the 1986 election. And rather than using a violent response against that, 2 million people came into the streets and engaged with the soldiers, split the military so that some of them defected. And within 4 days, not 10 years, but 4 days, the dictator was out of the country. The other great example along these lines, it happened in Chile. And as some of us know, uh, the democratically elected government of Chile was toppled militarily with a coup by the military led by uh, General Augusto Pinochet in 1973. Interestingly enough, September 11th, 1973. That's actually a kind of fuzzy picture of a bombing, taking aerial bombing that he conducted on the city of Santiago, the capital. And I was really taken with the fact that when I was uh, asked to be part of a gathering of 20 North American and Latin American uh, activists in the early 1990s in Northern California, two Chileans got up and talked about what they did right after this happened. This was a moment that the military was just mowing down the progressive movement. And so a handful of people met in the basement of a church and said, what we need in Chile is a nonviolent revolution. And they committed themselves to train the country in nonviolence. And they took a few years and trained 200 people in the kinds of things that we can get training now at no risk at the moment in this country about how nonviolent change works. And then each one went out to teach one, so that by the early 1980s, 30,000 people a year were being trained in active, creative, challenging, nonviolent change. And these activists told us the behind the scenes story. Training was essential. It made possible bringing down Pinochet after the resurgence of the movement, with the backbone of it being training, to the point where he was deposed in 1989, 1990. I learned, and I came away from that presentation by those two Chileans. I redoubled my own interest in and wanting to see nonviolence training happen. There are many other things that I can point to, but in the interest of time, I think what I want to do is just offer you a few examples, and then based on that, let's look at From Violence to Wholeness and see what in that process can strengthen us to do likewise. So first of all, I'm going to share with you a little video, if I can manage to do this, that we actually publicized this. Oh, yeah, here it is. This morning in the Pachavene newsletter. So some of you may have seen this or not, but I thought it's really powerful, sort of low-key nonviolent action. And so let me get that set up for us. And get me back on share screen. Here we go. So I'm going to show you this little 2.5 minute little video. And again, I'm going to ask you to think about, well, how did that happen? It just didn't happen. Okay, here we go. As relatively simple as it is. Oh, there's one thing I need to do. I need to make sure the sound is good. Yeah, here we go. Okay, starts out with no sound, but then it gets going. So I invite you to think about the elements that are part of this particular little action. As I said, it starts with no sound. Are you able to see this?
Hey, you want coffee? Hell yeah!
Come over. Don't fight how you really feel. Come closer to me. I'll give you something to believe in. Come over. to pull you from the other side. What I need to show you is my obligation. How much longer can you hide? You can try and push away from me. You kick and scream, you're begging, please. But once you get a little taste of freedom, you'll wanna get up off your knees. Come over, don't fight how you really feel. Come closer to me. I'll give you something to believe in. Come over, don't fight how you really feel. Come closer, please. I'll give you something to believe
Okay. Right. So I'm needing to turn this off. Okay. So think about that action for a moment. They didn't get there was no movement that said put that banner together, figure out a creative way to do that. They didn't get a tweet from heaven say to do that. They figured out we're not going to wait to be big part of something big. We can do something. And I actually, when I started as a baby activist 40 years ago, our affinity group prided itself on not just doing what other people were doing and not just waiting for the big actions, but doing a lot of small actions that were part of a big movement. And this group is part of a big movement, building a culture of active, creative nonviolence. And something like this under this regime could be considered illegal or worse going forward. I do invite us to think about, can we get in a group if we're not already in one, and to do something similar. All right, I'm going to offer one more nonviolent action. And so let me make sure this is all, yeah, okay. So this has to do with the fact that there's been a movement for 5,000 years for disability rights. Jesus was part of that movement. But it was only until 1990 that this country had something called the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was being stalled in Congress after a lot of work, a lot of actions in a lot of places, a lot of movement building. And I'm going to offer you a very short little video to give you a sense of what pushed that over the top. This comes from the Texas Disability History Collection. And
U.S. Capitol Crawl, Wheels of Justice Action, March 12, 1990.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because what they did, they had these amazing speeches. The Congress was totally paralyzed on this. And then somebody had come up with this amazing idea that they planned for the night before, but that really was the catalyst for getting Congress to finally say yes to this. And what it was they decided, unlike people on January 6, 2021, who decided to use violence at the Capitol, they were going to use their unarmed bodies to indicate that there is no access to the people's house, to the Capitol. And that what was needed was that access. And so I want to give you a little taste of that for a minute or two here. We'll stand. They
People
started
with various disabilities
walking
are
up
out of their wheelchairs and crawling and
the
climbing
stairs
up
of the
steps.
Capitol, putting
The
their
man holds a
disability
woman under
on
her arms
display.
and drags her up the steps. Spread out across the wide expanse of steps, several people crawl slowly on their hands and knees.
Their lack of action.
Diana Vietz. Diana crawls. The woman next to her drags her crutches along with her as she hops on her hands and knees. They arrive at one of the landings between the 5 tiers of steps, slide along, and continue up.
I've done about 20. I've never done 72 in one shot.
Pace yourself. Pace yourself. Take your time.
Damn process.
Water then crawls across the landing.
Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer.
Jennifer, the girl, hops up the steps using her chin for balance as she pulls her knees onto the concrete slab.
Okay. In the interest of time, Jennifer, who's now in her 30s, said this was the high point of her life. And maybe you heard her say, "I'll take all night if I have to." And they were upset that there were no members of Congress to meet them there, but there was huge media attention on this, and it broke the logjam. And within a month or two, the historic, groundbreaking, never seen before Americans with Disabilities Act happened. If we had more time, we could look at a lot of actions that happened, people chaining themselves to buses, taking over federal buildings, and so on. So I would just invite us to think about these 2 actions that we just saw dramatized. On the one hand, the one that happened this week on Wednesday in Raleigh, North Carolina, and then the one that happened in 1990 on the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. What kind of training do you need to make those actions possible? Maybe I'll just open it up for a second. I don't know if you can unmute yourself, and if something that occurs to you, please share. What are you seeing there? What is happening there? But also, how does preparing for something like that make a difference? Because often we hear about these things maybe in the press, but we don't think about what goes on behind the scenes to make them happen. Yes, David.
Ken, thanks so much for those videos. And I just had the thought, we need training to think outside the box. I really like the artistic approach. And Joan Baez, with this great interview lately, she has the power of her voice and singing, although she's turned now to dancing. The different kind of confrontational actions that get coverage somehow, as been kind of a desert for quite a while, but there's always someone who can come up with something different. That kind of training.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I want to just totally underscore that 17 times. One of the reasons my affinity group, called Spirit Affinity Group in the 1980s, didn't just take actions off the shelf was because we felt like actions on the shelf, a march, a procession, whatever, those were really creative at one time. But they're the larger conversation you're trying to have with society, that is a script that people have seen a million times. So what the bridge action, which we could do in our own way, in our own localities, but we maybe do it differently, or this amazing action on the steps of the Capitol. I'm using your phrase, David. They thought outside the box. Why? Not only because it's more creative, it's creative so that you can have a conversation with your society. You can reach the right brain of your society. So, any other comments on any one of these two actions in terms of what you noticed and why training would be important? Like, what if we were really trained in that creativity? What if our nonviolence trainings were all about that creativity? I in the interest of time, I won't go into a very deep thing, but some of us held a banquet in front of the Civic Center Plaza in San Francisco and had a banquet with our unhoused sisters and brothers who were being arrested for eating in public. And rather than a protest or rather than a march, we said, this is what society should look like, where we sit down to eat together, hang out together. 45 mosques, synagogues, Protestant and Catholic churches each took a table, and we made it the greatest banquet we could make it. The greatest food, cut flowers, linen tablecloths, choirs. And the police went in to try to arrest us, but we sent our leaders over. And while they were talking, we set up this banquet in 90 seconds. And we got huge attention from the larger society. And actually, those statutes were dissolved, and 53,000 tickets that had been given to homeless people were shredded by the district attorney. So thinking, as David said, thinking outside the box. So I just highly encourage us to do that. It's really important. And I'm going to now move to From Violence to Wholeness. So back on to our, sorry, that's not it, to our PowerPoint. Here we go. Not sure why that's doing that. Okay, let me try that again. Okay, let's try that. All right, so From Violence to Wholeness. What I had noticed in the organizing in the 80s, I think that's the 1980s, not the 1880s, was that on the one hand, you could get a training in how to go to jail or build a movement. And on the other hand, you could get a training on how do we be nonviolent with ourselves and others. And From Violence to Wholeness came from this kind of concept, can we put those two together? So that was the whole idea behind this program and this process. And so we integrated dealing with our own violence, dealing with violence between ourselves, violence in the streets, but also the social, structural, systemic violence of racism, sexism, homophobia, militarism, and so forth. And so I put this process together, And I did it after I came to work with the Franciscans at Pace Bene. I just celebrated my 35th anniversary of working with Pace Bene on September 15th. And the idea was to, how do we get at any form of violence, which is physical, verbal, institutional, or structural, behavior, attitude, policy, or condition that disrespects, dominates, dehumanizes, diminishes, or destroys ourselves, our fellow beings, or our world. And so often we get these scripts for dealing with it. How do we deal with conflict and violence? Through avoidance, accommodation, counter-violence. And we have this other script that Jesus taught us and that others have taught us as well, of active, creative nonviolence that isn't avoiding, it's not accommodating, it's not using counter-violence. It's recognizing that we have two hands. Nonviolence has these two hands. On the one hand, I will not cooperate with violence and injustice. But on the other hand, I'm not just doing this, and I'm not just go ahead, run me over. I'm going to do this. And we learned this from the great civil rights activist Barbara Deming. I will not cooperate with this injustice, but I'm open to you as a human being. And so, got to make sure my power is in here. So we've been playing with that throughout, from Violence to Wholeness and Pace Bene and different movements. What was key to us in doing this process was it had to be based in stories, like our own experience. So when we started this, my colleague Alain Richard, this irascible Franciscan priest who said, I will not be nonviolent until 15 minutes after I am dead. But anyway, he tried with nonviolence, and we did a training together. The very first week-long training we did in Nevada, in a place with no air conditioning and so on, 35 people. And we asked people to share an experience of violence. And nobody wanted to talk about that. But finally, after waiting like 5-10 minutes, and I'm looking at Alain and saying, well, that's a non-starter. This man raised his hand. He was a police officer. And he shared with us about the violence he had perpetrated. His son was part of this training. And maybe for the first time, he had heard this experience of violence that his father was willing to share. And after that, we realized there is, in safe space, it's possible to reflect our own experience of violence, what we've perpetrated, what's been perpetrated on us, again, at whatever level we feel comfortable, but also the stories like we shared already in this webinar, this seminar, is those stories of active, creative, nonviolent change. There are a variety of learning styles, so some presentation, some reading, some reflection together, some transformation, role plays, and action. How do we now put this into practice in the world? And that was always a part of many of the trainings that we led, that it was grounded in spirituality, it was meant to help create community, and it was always about reflection, unpack everything, every action, because when we have an action, when we reflect on the action, it itself is a new action. And all of this being a journey to a nonviolent way of being. Well, there are many elements that were part of the process of From Violence to Wholeness. I'm just going to mention them here, but I do highly recommend, if you haven't done them already, Pace Bene has a series of trainings, and trainings are happening online in lots of places around the world. But one of the things that we teach is on the social change is that there are pillars of support that keep injustice and violence or even authoritarian regime in place. Those pillars of support are the military, schools, government, business, religion, media, and really the people. And so a movement is not about telling the power holders that they're wrong. It's about having a conversation with all those pillars of support and make them wobbly and begin to bring them down and open the possibilities for an alternative. Here's something I really learned that I really appreciate and I hope you'll find helpful. It's called the spectrum of allies. So often when we're involved in a movement, we're barking at the wrong people. We're over here, the leading activists, we're the active allies, and now we're yelling at the active opponents. Those people likely are not going to change their minds. Even the passive opponents, that's hard. What we're really trying to do is trying to win the passive allies. And then we win the net friendly neutrals. And then we win the obvious neutrals. Sometimes the passive opponents will come over. The problem is so many times our movements are focused only at trying to change the minds of people over here. And that's not often the way these movements work, because as this comes together, the pillars of support begin to come down, and the people power that's necessary to have that shift happen are more likely to happen. We certainly don't have time to go through the 8 stages of a social movement, but my friend and housemate Bill Moyer created this in the 1980s, the 8 stages of a movement that really help us see movements don't happen overnight. They take a process of convincing the public there's a problem, convincing the public to oppose the problem, and then most importantly of all, convincing the public to support the nonviolent alternative. This takes time. That's why these things don't happen like that. But this is how long-term social change, like what we discovered at the Nevada test site, ending nuclear testing, or even the Pledge of Resistance I was a part of in ending US wars in Central America and stopping an invasion. And finally, for those who don't know, this amazing work by Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stephan, who showed us that nonviolent strategies are twice as effective as violent ones, giving the lie to the idea that nonviolence doesn't work. And that the one thing that's being used now in a lot of opposition in this moment is the idea that if you do your organizing right, you can get 3.5% of the population to get behind this idea. And when you get to 3.5% or more, you're likely to see success. If you're interested in training, Pace Bene has quite a few trainings online that you can, I'm going to give John this PowerPoint. He could get this to you if he wants to. But there's a nice link there to the events on our Pace Bene's page under events. And also there's a whole thing on training partners, 50 organizations that do the kind of training I've been talking about here. And finally, it's really, we can't, like I said, change the world by ourselves. We need other ordinary cranky people. And I think it's really great to get into what we call an affinity group. Small group of 5 to 15 people. Could be virtual, but some of the times it's really best to be local together in the living room together, supporting one another, studying together, strategizing together, watering the plants when your friend goes to jail, or calling the boss that they're not going to be in the next day. And finally, I know we're going to have questions and answers in a moment, but I would ask you, if you would, could you go into the chat and just write very quickly one takeaway from this presentation? What's something that's sticking with you from this presentation? And then after we do that for a minute, I'll hand this back to John and we'll see where we are. So if everybody can, at whatever level you feel comfortable, can go into the chat and just say, what's a takeaway from the last hour? So I want to, right before I close, let's just look at what you put up there. Think outside the box, be creative, the importance of a series of small actions in coordination. I want to start praying Cesar Chavez's prayer. Thank you for that. We need to form peace groups within our parish and parishes, decrease evil rather than feeding it through violence, affirmation for training and finding a group. As a nonviolence trainer, find a core affinity group again and be creative. Training is key. The imaginative videos. Change won't happen if it is me against the world. We need community. Think outside the box. The need for training. Violence is very complex. It's a mystery in a lot of ways. I'm also sitting with the question about what training our local church leadership would need. Training in nonviolent strategies is important. The need to find or establish an affinity group and the absolute necessity for training and the need for artistic and visual creativity to reach people. Very grateful for all of these takeaways, and I'm grateful that we're all in this circle. And 5 years from now, let's look back at this, see where we are, and the impact of a circle like this is huge. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, John.
Friends, join me in giving a big thank you to Ken for teaching us so well this morning about active nonviolence. That was really wonderful, Ken, and really postdoctoral, accessible, practical, skills-making nonviolence, and really invigorating for me, and I'm sure for everybody. So we have 25 minutes. We'll end right at the hour and a half mark. I wanted to ask Marie to offer a response, but friends, please write in a question for Ken, or you can go to I think it's the react button and raise your hand, and then I'll call on you if you've got a question for Ken, mainly questions. Ken, it was great. Thanks so much. Marie, give us a few responses to Ken.
Oh, a big thank you to Ken. That was really, it was great, Ken. Interesting and challenging and good ideas. Just a few things that were on my mind. One of them was, and you mentioned this, but I sort of wanted to lift up the importance of creative efforts. I mean, constructive efforts that sort of being able to imagine what we want to create, how we want to live, how we want our societies and our communities to function, to be together. I think that's a really important part of what it's always important. I think right now it's especially important because I think we're so flooded with sort of loss of hope and sort of discouraging news. And along those lines, I have been reading myself and highly recommending to people to regularly read nonviolence news and waging nonviolence because we need an antidote to the news that we get every day, and to know that there are so many creative, nonviolent actions, some of them very small, some of them very big, some of them very successful, some of them not particularly successful in achieving whatever it was they were setting out to achieve. I think we need those stories, just like the stories that you were telling. And so I'm just a big fan of those sources that keep putting on the table the stories of hope from around the world. And there are a lot of stories. And I think just the number of stories is a source of hope for me, just like the number of people seeking training in nonviolent strategies is a source of hope to me. The fact that, what was it, 130,000 people who signed up for one of the webinar trainings that Maria and others did a few weeks ago, that's fabulous. It's really exciting. So Thanks, Ken. That was great.
Well, thanks, Marie. For those who don't know, Marie and I are colleagues at the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative and the Catholic Institute for Nonviolence. And I think that constructive program you have lived out in your life at the Assisi community in Washington and beyond. You know, Gandhi said, look, if we did it right, the constructive program would be enough for bringing independence in India, meaning building out the culture of active nonviolence and the importance of that. And so uh, when I taught at DePaul University, I had my students look at violent Chicago. They had to put on the board everything that is violent in the city of Chicago, especially systemic things, but everything else. But then I said on the other board, now we're going to construct nonviolent Chicago. And I want you to take those things that are up on violent Chicago and figure out how we can build a culture that makes a nonviolent Chicago possible. And when doing that, they realized we actually are well on our way to a nonviolent Chicago. So the importance of the constructive program is absolutely essential. It will be very important. At Pace Bene, our mantra is let's build a culture of active, creative, liberating nonviolence. So couldn't agree more. And those sources for stories, uh, really important and powerful. And actually, if we don't have the stories, this thing's not going anywhere. So I'm glad you raised those.
Thanks, Ken, and thanks so much, Marie. I see Ed and Noreen have a question. So well, how about I'm going to unmute you, Ed and Noreen, and let you ask Ken, or you can unmute yourself, or Ruth Ann can unmute them. Yeah, go ahead, Ed and Noreen.
He's unmuted. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we elders are here mostly with gray hair. How do we reach the youth who are on social media and so flooded by propaganda and so many people in the wake of school shootings? I'm a special ed advocate. I work with people with disabilities, and the kids are numb. They don't know how to access their inner core, their own nonviolence. It's just really hard with social media.
They're the generation that's going to be receiving what happens right now. So they are the ones that really need to pay attention.
So just reaching people in the community to come out. We have, we do go out on the freeway overpasses in Petaluma, and every day today from 2 to 3:30, we have a group of Palestinian activists, people from the community who are Palestinian, who have formed. We're out at the downtown at the park with signs right there in the middle of Petaluma. So we're doing those small things. It's a lot of old people.
Well, can I reflect with you on this?
Sure.
Yeah. At Pace Bene, we always said, well, where are the youth? Where are the youth? Where are the youth? Somebody would appear and then they'd leave. And we decided to institutionalize what we call the Youth Changemaker Grants. And it started because a friend of John and myself and Marie and Kathy and others here, David Hartso, was given an award by the University of San Francisco, and he got a certain cash prize with it. And of course, knowing David, he wanted to make sure that he didn't keep that money and it went for something. And he gave it to Pace Bene. And out of that, we started the Youth Changemaker Grants. We're now in what will begin our 5th year of this. And we basically said, here's $1,000 for somebody between 12 and 23 to, if they're open to building a constructive, nonviolent action or project locally. And oh my gosh, we found out that there are lots of youth out there that would apply for these. And what an amazing experience. And not just in this country, we have people from throughout Asia and Africa who have been part of this program. And so we found some way to open the space, but also made it something that was feasible. And there's something amazing that begins to get rolling when you think outside the box. And it's not us telling them what to do or how to do it. What's moving by what you both just said was, can we imagine for a moment a youth movement for nonviolence? I think it's possible. I don't think it's because we say it should happen, but if we can support those seeds, people like the amazing people we've met through this project. So it's not easy. There are a lot of challenges. I have if you can believe it, my daughter is a junior in high school. So I see all the challenges. And I think it is possible. And I think it will come out of their own initiative in light of everything that's happening. But we are the ones who can help support it. But if we find in our organizations a way to do something, maybe like what we did at Pachybene, something can happen.
Thanks so much, Ken, and thank you, Ed and Noreen. I wanted to, if it's okay, call on you, Kathy Neese, and see if you had any thoughts or comments for Ken. I know you've worked with us before. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or Ruth Ann can unmute you. What do you think about this? You have a question for Ken?
Well, yeah, because I've moved from the Bay Area now, and I live in Nebraska, and there's a lot of people in Nebraska that don't know or can't see. I mean, they're taken to the streets now with their signs and standing up and all that. And I'm trying to try to get them to figure out ways to move beyond just having signs and screaming at the authorities. So this has been very helpful for me, just listening to, because when you talked about the table that we all did in so that everybody has a seat at the table, that's one of the most memorable things of my whole experience in the Bay Area was, and that stood out all these years, is like, how do we walk with the people that we're trying to be a witness with? So anyway, but that's my hard part here though, and I don't know how to reach out to people. We're trying different ways, but it's still very difficult. So any suggestions?
Yeah, so thanks, Kathy. So wonderful to see you again. I'm so glad we were part of that little action back in San Francisco, which was also, the organizing included that unhoused as well, not just those who weren't. And so that it's an especially powerful experience I think we can call to mind. So I think first of all, I think the idea of helping people get into these movements, that's one of the hardest things we have, because there's some little invisible barrier. And so we have to find really creative ways. But then you have people who are already seeing themselves mobilizing, but maybe don't have that rootedness in or aware of the power of active, creative, nonviolent strategies. And so I don't know. You are in Nebraska and I'm in Illinois, so I may not have the answers for you. But I would say, is there a way to affirm what they're doing? Like, is there a way to have a party to call people together and say, that was so awesome that you have your sign and that you're doing this. And I'd love to know more about that. How'd you get here? Who are you? I'll tell you about who I am. I was part of this thing in San Francisco, and we were trying to think outside the box. But I'd love to hear how you got here. And I think, the big things are circles. And if we can if we can open the space for circles like that, and maybe it starts with 3 people or maybe one person. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think something like that might help?
Yeah,
you're on mute.
Yeah. That, I mean, it's going to take the little reaching out, I think.
Yeah.
It's the building the relationships, which is important in building community one by one.
I think it would be really wonderful if you're willing to do that. I think, and I'd love to hear how it goes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Ken. You know, I'm hearing you, Ken, thinking outside the box and being creative, but also calling us, use the word affinity groups. And they were so, I think it was part of the times of the 80s with Central America. So many thousands went to Central America, and then they came back and they wanted to do something. And then these small groups appeared all over the country.
Mhm.
Wow, do we need that now?
Yeah.
But it's very hard to do it. And um, you just said a very simple thing, call people together. It's usually all you have to do is we just need somebody to put up the notice on the church saying we're having a meeting Tuesday night at 7 o'clock to talk about what we can do.
Yeah.
Anybody interested, come and put your name and phone number and send out an email. And a lot of people may show up. It's just somebody that's what we can all do. And I hear you calling us to do that. Kathy has a question for you, Ken. Do you want to read it out loud? You want me to read it? Or Kathy, you want to sell us?
Oh, Kathy, do you want to just share your question?
Sure. Here in Wilmore, Kentucky, we're in a really red area,
Yeah.
but we do have a group of about 40 people who are forming a group called Wilmore Without Borders, and we want to brace ourselves for the huge increase of ICE agents that are projected.
Yeah.
So that we can have people trained to film ICE raids, potentially accompany people to court, provide for needs. And I've been asked to be in charge of the education part of this to try to help change public opinion to be more sympathetic to immigrant needs. And since we're such a religious community, I suggested meeting with some pastors and asking if we can talk in some Sunday school classes. But I'm a little bit wary of how to approach these conversations because, you know, I'll be talking to pastors who have been very dogmatic and insisting that people vote for Trump and that sort of thing. And so I don't want to be offensive and thus get the door slammed. But I know that they also are Christians who care about people and immigrants too, because they're people. So how would you begin a conversation like this with a Republican pastor?
Right. Well, I'm not in your context, so it may be different from where I'm sitting, but to the extent that you're able to have to whatever level it's possible, of heart-to-heart conversation with this person or those people, because not with the idea that you are telling them how to think, but I'd like the opportunity to share what I'm feeling. And thinking is different than feeling. And one of the things we did in From Violence to Wholeness is we kind of looked at those two different things. Rather than kind of yelling at or broadcasting our message, we're actually sharing what we really feel. And I want to hear what you really feel. And we all did a process called CLARA: center, learn, articulate, receive, and accomplish. And through those role plays, we learned how to really receive what somebody we don't agree with, their piece of the truth. So Gandhi says we all have a piece of the truth. That pastor has a piece of the truth. You have a piece of the truth. The immigrants have a piece of the truth. The ICE agents have a piece of the truth. And we don't want to think they have a piece of the truth, but they have a piece of the truth. And the nonviolent struggle is to create the conditions where my piece of the truth and your piece of the truth can come together and make something a little bigger. And it's not really convincing them. It's like having that piece of the truth surface. So I think there might be some possibilities. They may shut that down immediately with some dogmatic statement or whatever, but that's okay. You're sharing your piece of the truth. And I do think role playing that, having somebody play the pastor before you do that, I think would be a really great thing to prepare you for that, or maybe even get from violence to wholeness and kind of go through that process, or give me a call or give Rosie a call to help with that. I think that would be great. I think you're actually on the cutting edge of what's going to be necessary in this society over the next 3.5 years. And so I really am grateful that you're going in that direction.
Thank you. And thank you to Tracy and to Ed and Noreen too. I'll be looking at those things. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. You know, Ken, I think maybe we're going to have to begin to wrap it up. And though we could listen all day to you. And so you're going to have to come back and continue this next year, because we're just going to keep needing your encouragement and teaching. Can I ask if you have any last words of advice to us as we go forward, maybe with the No King's March, sustaining, our energy, and or just encouragement to maybe think outside the box, do something new, or even start a local affinity group, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thanks, John. Here's what I would say. The fact that you're on this call on a Saturday, giving up your time to be here with these beautiful people, tells me that you want to see a better world. And quite likely, if we had a week to have a conversation in a circle, as opposed to my just spouting off for an hour, that we would hear such a journey you've each been on. I often said this in the 1980s, because even before the Central America work, I was in the anti-nuclear movement, anti-nuclear weapons movement. And we often thought, first of all, it's amazing that the world hasn't blown up, that somehow with all these weapons out there, that we still are living and still going forward, but that we were going to come to a time that will be a crossroads. We are at that crossroads. And some of us would prefer not to be at the crossroads. Everything you've learned in these decades of your life, every action you've taken in your family, in that relationship with your neighbors that you don't like very much, with your boss, with those people down the street, with your president, all those, that's all like gold. That's been preparing you. I thought it was about Central America and nuclear weapons and homelessness. No, it was about this moment. And when I stress training, we've all been getting our training. This is such a key reality now. We are at the threshold Dr. King talked about. And I want to bring joy to that. I want to say, I'm a change agent that's learned some things from every one of you now, as well as all the people who've been on this journey I've been on. And that's true for each of us. So then it comes down to some practical questions. Rather than saying, I've done my bit. Oh, I did my bit to prepare for this moment. We didn't know that this tsunami would be emanating from the Oval Office. It seemed, but it is. And we have power, and we also have knowledge and wisdom. So I want to thank you for your knowledge and wisdom. And now we have to put that gold into a special furnace together. By ourselves, it's not going to matter. But even if a few of us continued our conversations, and like John said, get with some people in our church or on our block or at work or whatever, to say, can we have a conversation? And then the conversation, like what Dorothy Day said, we had a conversation and it led to all of this, building a movement. Similarly, that's going to happen. You all have to keep living for 5 years so we can have this conversation in 5 years that John's going to call us to, and we'll compare our notes.
Join me in thanking our friend Ken Butigan for a very helpful, enlightening, and empowering session. Ken, you were terrific. Thanks so much I hope everyone can follow up on Pace Bene and get the book, and you can write to Ken. You saw his email. Next on the Zoom, we'll have on October 25th, I think, Sister Simone. I'm having a senior moment. I'm forgetting Simone's
Campbell.
Campbell. I just talked to her yesterday. And she's going to explain all things to us. You know, she won the Presidential Medal of Freedom a couple of years ago as the leading change agent for Obamacare. And then in November, we have Jim Finley back talking about the mystical depths of nonviolence. And then I'll have a conversation just before Christmas with Sister Elizabeth Johnson on the theology, spirituality, and politics of incarnation. How about that, Ken Butigan?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
One of the
And,
greats on the planet.
Yeah. And I hope you all check out the podcast too. We have Archbishop Wester this week, and on Monday, my friend, who is the friend of the Beatles, John Fugelsang, with the big New York Times bestseller, Separation of Church and Hate. And then in a couple of weeks, Joan Baez is going to be talking with me about nonviolence on the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. So don't miss that. And you could help me by spreading the word. Thank you for being here. Thanks for supporting the beatitudecenter.org. Support Ken's work. God bless everybody. And I'm going to have to sign off right now. So take care. Thanks, Ken. I'll call you. God bless you all. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.